The Gods of Pegana. Chapter 12. The Revolt of the Home Gods. There be 3 broad rivers of the plain, born before memory or fable, whose mothers are 3 grey peaks, and whose father was the storm. Their names be Imes, Z per thousand Nis, and Segstrion. And Imes is the joy of lowing herds, and Z per thousand Nis hath bowed his neck to the yoke of man, and carries the timber from the forest far up below the mountain, and Segstrion sings old songs to shepherd boys, singing of his childhood in a lone ravine, and of how he once sprang down the mountain sides and far away into the plain to see the world, and of how one day at last he will find the sea. These be the rivers of the plain, wherein the plain rejoices. But old men tell, whose fathers heard it from the ancients, how once the lords of the 3 rivers of the plain rebelled against the law of the worlds, and passed beyond their boundaries, and joined together, and whelmed cities, and slew men, saying, "We now play the game of the gods, and slay men for our pleasure, and we be greater than the gods of Pegana." And all the plain was flooded to the hills. And Imes, Z per thousand Nis, and Segstrion sat upon the mountains, and spread their hands over their rivers that rebelled by their command. But the prayer of men going upward found Pegana, and cried in the ear of the gods, "There be 3 home gods who slay us for their pleasure, and say that they be mightier than Pegana's gods, and play their game with men." Then were all the gods of Pegana very wroth, but they could not whelm the lords of the 3 rivers, because being home gods, though small, they were immortal. And still the home gods spread their hands across their rivers, with their fingers wide apart, and the waters rose and rose, and the voice of their torrent grew louder, crying, "Are we not Imes, Z per thousand Nis, and Segstrion?" Then Mung went down into a waste of Afric, and came upon the drought Umbul as he sat in the desert upon iron rocks, clawing with miserly grasp at the bones of men, and breathing hot. And Mung stood before him as his dry sides heaved, and ever as they sank his hot breath blasted dry sticks and bones. Then Mung said, "Friend of Mung, go thou and grin before the faces of Imes, Z per thousand Nis, and Segstrion, till they see whether it be wise to rebel against the gods of Pegana." And Umbul answered, "I am the beast of Mung." And Umbul came and crouched upon a hill upon the other side of the waters, and grinned across them at the rebellious home gods. And whenever Imes, Z per thousand Nis, and Segstrion stretched out their hands over their rivers, they saw before their faces the grinning of Umbul. And because the grinning was like death in a hot and hideous land, therefore they turned away and spread their hands no more over their rivers, and the waters sank and sank. But when Umbul had grinned for 30 days, the waters fell back into the riverbeds, and the lords of the rivers slunk away back again to their homes. Still Umbul sat and grinned. Then Imes sought to hide himself in a great pool beneath a rock, and Z per thousand Nis crept into the middle of a wood, and Segstrion lay and panted on the sand. Still Umbul sat and grinned. And Imes grew lean and was forgotten, so that the men of the plain would say, "Here once was Imes, and Z per thousand Nis scarce had strength to lead his river to the sea." And as Segstrion lay and panted, a man stepped over his stream, and Segstrion said, "It is the foot of a man that has passed across my neck, and I have sought to be greater than the gods of Pegana." Then said the gods of Pegana, "It is enough. We are the gods of Pegana, and none are equal." Then Mung sent Umbul back to his waste in Afric to breathe again upon the rocks, and parch the desert, and to sear the memory of Afric into the brains of all who ever bring their bones away. And Imes, Z per thousand Nis, and Segstrion sang again, and walked once more in their accustomed haunts, and played the game of life and death with fishes and frogs, but never essayed to play it any more with men, as do the gods of Pegana.